We had been looking forward to hosting you all in person, but we are thankful we're able to have you all here virtually. Before I get into the business of the meeting, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, John L. Jim, Innovacorp, and Nova Scotia Association of Realtors. Thank you for your support. As we get started with the order of business, I'll explain briefly how we will handle each motion. You can find the necessary documents at the beginning of the chat function at the top right of your screen, such as agenda, minutes, and our financials. I encourage you to have a quick look at them now if you haven't done so already. We will also use the chat function to approve each motion. As we go through, we ask that one member type first into the chat, then another member second, and then we will ask the remaining members to type yes or no to pass each motion, and Melissa will be monitoring the comments. You will also see at the top right of your screen a Q&A function. You can use the Q&A function if you have questions pertaining to the business of the meeting. Now, on to the business. Can I ask for an approval of the agenda? I'll ask for a first. And a second. Okay, thanks, Peter and Todd. And if I could have everyone else vote yes or no in the comment section. Awesome. All right, thanks, everyone. The motion is carried. Excuse me. Now I'll ask for an approval of the minutes from the 2019 AGM. If I could ask for a first and a second. I take it Craig is our second. And yes from everyone or no? Fantastic. It's strange that I'm only looking at myself on here, but thanks everyone for your help through this. Now, since our treasurer, Darren Chesson, was unable to join us today, I'd like to invite Dr. Peter Kerr to present the financials.
Thanks, Michelle. So with the package that was included in your chat, the financial statements for 2020 are included in that package. I'm going to make a couple of comments about the 2020 financials before we put forward a motion to approve them. Overall, the Chamber emerged from 2020 out of 2020 in a good financial position with the assistance of two government programs, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. And this financial position is obviously important given the remaining uncertainties for 2021. Looking at the statements themselves, in terms of the revenue differences year over year, they're primarily driven by events. As you know, most of our major events did not happen in 2020, other than a couple of special events held before the pandemic. This was, however, offset by the two government programs that I've already mentioned, as well as an increased number of educational programs that we ran throughout 2020. In terms of expenses, our expenses are fairly consistent year over year, with the big difference being in bad debt. And the bad debt really reflects a cleanup of our non-active members from previous years. We felt it important to get focused around that moving forward. So that work has been largely done. Our overall cash position is good. Our accounts receivable reflect about $18,000 owed still from members, and the remaining is really owed from the government for the assistance programs. Our prepaid expenses reflect expenses paid for the Advantage Conference that was moved to 2021. And deferred revenue is really a combination of sponsorship and ticket revenue for that same conference, and some of our educational programs that we are delivering in 2021, as well as some funding for the doctor recruitment strategy. So those are the major comments. I'm now going to make a motion to approve the 2020 financial statements. So if I could have someone indicate first motion. Good. And then I've got to have that motion seconded. Perfect, thank you. And then lastly, if you could indicate you're in favor of the approval of the financial statements by indicating a yes and or a no for anyone opposed. Very good. I'm going to turn things back now to Michelle.
Thanks so much, Peter. Now for a brief reflection on 2020. As we look back on the year 2020, it started with high hopes for so many businesses and organizations. It was going to be a stellar year for cruise, tourism, economic, and community development. It seemed to have come crashing to a screeching halt last March when we received word that the coronavirus was spreading through Canada. Everyone scrambled to wrap our heads around what was happening. We also saw other tragedies happen right here in our own province, and it seemed pretty grim. But in the midst of all the chaos, frustration, sadness, and confusion, we saw a nation come together. We saw people caring for their neighbors. We saw frontline staff going the extra mile for their communities. We saw organizations working together. We saw governments responding to the needs of citizens in real time. And we saw that maybe we all just needed a little break. Through all of this, our chamber was there to help those trying to navigate the constant updates, programs, restrictions, supports, and financial aids. Kathleen was on her own through much of the beginning stages, and I'm sure you will all agree that her tireless efforts did not go unnoticed. She seemed to know each and every detail of every program and update that came our way, and advocated for change when necessary. I don't think we'll ever know how many hours she put into her work, and for that we thank her. She created a Facebook group to support our business community. She updated the website with COVID-19 information and sent regular emails to our members with the most up-to-date information possible. She attended countless virtual meetings with other organizations, politicians, and bureaucrats, and other chambers right across Canada. On top of that, she walked members and non-members alike through the often confusing processes and laughed and cried with them. As the year continued, Kathleen, Melissa, and Erica did everything they could to make operations and events as normal as possible while keeping us all safe, informed, and educated. And while we still may not know what the future holds for us, I feel confident that the Chamber will continue to be a support and a strong voice for current and future members and the business community at large. Now for our outgoing board members, I'd like to thank the following people for their service to the Chamber as outgoing board members: Noelle McLean, Cindy McDonald, and John McNeil. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the service to the Chamber that John has provided. It's actually funny. For one, John has been with us so long that no one actually remembers when he joined the board, including John. What we do know is that during that time, John has proven his leadership as chair, past chair, and has been a voice of wisdom for anyone who has had the honor of working with him. I wish we were here in person so I could present him with a plaque today. However, Kathleen will get it to him as soon as possible. Thanks again, John, for your commitment and dedication to the Chamber. I'd now like to introduce our incoming board members. Angela Adams, Hall's Air Conditioning, Heating and Maintenance Limited. Chuck Ogley, District 11 Taxi. Douglas McLennan, Lindsay Construction. Shelley Bennett Triffus, Triffus Design Consultants. And for our continuing board members and executive committee, Craig Boudreau, J. Francis Investments. Glenn Turner, NSCC Marconi Campus. Ian Parker, LaFosse McLeod Barristers and Solicitors. Dr. Peter Kerr, Cape Breton University. Todd Mercer, Mercer Fuels. And our executive treasurer, Darren Chesson, MNP. Vice Chair, Paula McNeil, Cape Breton Regional Hospital Foundation. Chair, Sean McDonald, Portside Law. Past Chair, myself, Michelle Wilson, Sydney Downtown Development Association. And if I could ask you all once again for a motion to approve the Board of Directors for 2021, if I could ask for a first. Craig is first, and a second, if you could type second. Thanks, Peter. And everyone in favor, if you could type yes or no. Awesome. And John, I don't know if you saw the comments, but everyone seems to agree with me. Before I hand things over, I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but if anybody has any questions about any of the business regarding today's meeting, you can post it in the Q&A now. I don't think I saw any comments in the chat either. So having not seen any, I would like to hand the virtual stage over to Sean McDonald as incoming chair for some remarks. Sean, can we possibly just do it with your mic on? Can you make the remarks?
Morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. The wonders of technology, and it's probably more a deficiency on my part that I wasn't able to join when I was supposed to. So sorry to leave you hanging there, Michelle, in your last act as the chair of the board of directors. And I'd like to thank Michelle, and I hope to live up to the standard that she has set. She's been a wonderful chair of our board, and as she's identified, it's been a challenging year in 2020, and we have some challenges still ahead of us in 2021, but I certainly look forward to working with the board, navigating those issues, and as Michelle also indicated, I have the utmost faith in Kathleen and as our CEO to guide us through this process as she has so capably done this past year. So again, thank you very much to Michelle as our outgoing chair. I look forward to working with the board coming this year. We lawyers are not known for our brevity, but I'm going to keep my remarks very brief and simply say that I'm very excited to work with the board going forward, both the members that I've worked with previously and the new members going forward to help serve the business community. So subject to that, again, I'd like to thank our sponsors, John L. Jim, Innovacorp, and the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors. I will conclude my remarks by simply saying that I appreciate this opportunity. I look forward to working with everyone in the year ahead. And as the AGM slogan quite rightly says, opportunity is here, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. So I'm going to turn it over to Paula McNeil, who's going to introduce our panelists for today's panel. So thanks very much, everyone, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Hello, everyone. It's Paula here from beautiful downtown Sydney Mines. I'm looking forward to the year ahead as the newly minted vice chair for the chamber, and looking forward to working with you, Sean, and the rest of the board, and with Kathleen and all the staff. So welcome to the fireside chat entitled Opportunity is Here. I'm sure we all agree that it's been a challenging year, both personally and professionally, but this has not necessarily been the case for every sector. When we look at real estate, construction, and the biotech sectors, these industries are thriving, they're attracting new investment to the island and creating new opportunities right here at home. So I'm really happy to welcome Roger Boutilier, who is the CEO for the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors, Trent Soholt, who is the Executive Director for the Nova Scotia Construction Sector Council, Bob Pelley, who's the Regional Manager for both Cape Breton and Northern Nova Scotia for Innovacorp, and Dr. Beth Mason, who's the CEO for the Reassurance Center. This esteemed panel is going to share and elaborate on their respective areas and perhaps talk about the synergies across those areas. So now I'm going to hand it over to the CEO for the Chamber and the moderator for the panel. Over to you, Kathleen.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. As Paula said, my name is Kathleen, and I have the great privilege of being the CEO of the Cape Breton Regional Chamber of Commerce. Just before we get started, first I want to welcome our new board members. We have 4 incoming board members this year, and I'm really excited to work with all 4 of you. I want to thank the returning board members. We have an incredible group of hardworking business people that are so dedicated and committed to the Chamber of Commerce here in the CBRM, and it is truly an amazing group of people. So thank you so much for your continued commitment. And I wish those who we see that we've thanked for their time and that we're seeing go this year, including John McNeil, which, as Michelle so eloquently put it, his dedication has been absolutely phenomenal for more years than even he can remember. So we're super grateful. And I just want to say a quick shout out to Erica and Melissa, who we're the threesome here at the Chamber that kind of make it all happen in the background. And I honestly couldn't do it without them. And I'm grateful I have them in this lockdown. I didn't have them last lockdown. So things are looking up from that perspective. So let's dive right into it. Thank you so much, Paula, for that great introduction. And you said it so perfectly that amongst all this uncertainty and amongst a lot of struggle over the past 13 months, there is a lot of good that is happening here and an island. And I think we've waited quite some time to say that in a real way. And I think that this panel conversation hopefully will bring light to those watching both here on the Remo platform, and we're live streaming out through YouTube and on Facebook as well. That I hope that you all learned something today. I know that I sure have in talking to both Roger and Trent and Bob and Beth. And I know that we're in for a really great conversation. So let's kick that off. And I think a really good place to start is really just introducing each of these sectors and what they actually mean in terms of opportunity and economic growth and development here on Cape Breton Island, but also, as we know, for our entire province, because Cape Breton is a big part of Nova Scotia. We're the second largest urban center, economic center, as part of our province here in the CBRM. And we're playing a real big role in economic development here for our whole province. So I'm going to actually start with Beth. Beth, I see that you're on mute, so I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself because we're going to kick it off with you. And just to give a little bit of context, we won't dive into too much of the details, but most recently over the past, since the pandemic began, the Verschuren Center has done something pretty radical, and they separated from Cape Breton University, which has really given you the opportunity to not only access private and public funding in a new way, but also work with one of our panelists, Bob Pelley with Innovacorp, on developing this biotech sector in a way that we weren't able to before. So I would love to hear from you just a little bit about what that means in terms of bringing the biotech sector to Cape Breton Island, why the Verschuren Center, and if you could even just define what the biotech sector is. I know that there's a couple people that are wondering that. So we'll start with you, and I'll encourage Bob to pipe in as well, because Innovacorp is a big part of this opportunity.
Thanks, Kathleen, and thanks for having me on your panel today. Yeah, I was afraid you might ask me that. There's so many terms thrown around: bioeconomy, clean tech, all of these things, and I don't actually think any of us really know what they mean. But to your point, what we've done is we've created a space for those biotech companies, specifically companies that either have need for large-scale conversion technology to be able to scale their process. And so, to your point about what did we do when we separated, how have we been able to attract companies in that clean tech space? It's because we're building technology platforms that they can use to get to scale. And when we say scale, it's not this big. It's in the thousands of liters or the ton scale that companies need to get to market. And part of that has been, the reason it's been successful is the connection through the Nova Scotia ecosystem. Going back to the clean tech, what is it? It's either a chemical conversion or a biological conversion of linking our natural resources that we have in plenty in Nova Scotia to our manufacturing sector by providing them alternatives to petrochemical-based ingredients, products, materials. So even at that, you can see it spans such a vast area of potential manufacturing and consumer goods that it's really hard to basically, narrow down into one pocket. But there's a commonality of needs on those new businesses, and that is the need for scale and the need for us all collectively to wrap our resources around them. And that's what we've seen in Nova Scotia is partners like Innovacorp, ACOA on the infrastructure side, and the business development side, and also provincial and federal funds coming towards those companies to help those SMEs, as we call them, small, medium enterprises, get to commercial scale. And that's really critical because that is very difficult to find anywhere else across Canada.
Okay,
and to add on that, Kathleen, I think we really need to be globally relevant, and you have to look at what is the world doing today, and where are we going, and how can we take part. And two of the big challenges that the world is facing right now is feeding 9 billion people by the year 2050, and moving away from fossil fuels, so the climate change, and moving away from petrochemicals. And what the technologies and the expertise that the Verschuren Center has and brings to these companies that are growing is second to none. It's truly world class and positions Cape Breton in a really strong place to be relevant to that change, today and into the future. And that's really great for our economy because we're seeing companies relocate here. They're moving here to be part of that, to take advantage of the technology and the expertise and significantly grow their companies using Cape Breton as a base. And that ultimately is an economic driver that leads to what Roger and Trent are going to talk about, the impacts that has on construction and housing.
Yeah, so exciting, so exciting. I have so many questions, but we have some time. So I'm now going to jump to Trent. And so Trent, construction has been, a leading news story here in Cape Breton certainly since the pandemic, both residential and commercial. From the shortage of supplies, from somebody wanting to build their step to, the building of Nova Scotia Community College and our healthcare infrastructure around the CBRM. This is really historic investment. That's what we've been hearing. This is historic. But I know that, there's a bigger story than that, right? It's bigger than just the $1 billion build, as people have kind of coined it. And there's ways in which, this type of infrastructure investment is changing the game, there's uniqueness around this. Can you talk about that a little bit? Why this time is different beyond just the amount of dollars being spent here?
Absolutely, and it's kudos really out to the province for investing in healthcare projects before a pandemic. A lot of this investment was pre-pandemic, and it's certainly not lost on us as an industry that we're going through some pretty troubling times, and construction is now looking at healthcare as being a priority. So in my sector, we deal with everything bigger than a house and not a road. That's our industrial, commercial, institutional sector, and working with contractors, unions, the provincial government, partners such as the Chamber, and the Cape Breton Partnership and what have you, we're looking at these projects in a different lens, and largely because with this generational investment, the province has put contractual obligation to diversify our sector and procure projects differently, which is really, it's a first for not only Cape Breton, and Cape Breton's kind of the first in the queue across the country in doing it in this fashion, but it's taking a look at procurement under a best value procurement model and integrating what are called community benefit agreements. So looking at how we become more diverse, not just hiring more diverse individuals, but providing more meaningful employment opportunities for diverse individuals to enter our sector. And that's really going to build our workforce for tomorrow. So linking it to apprenticeship, linking it through to training, providing contractors and unions with diversity, inclusion, and respectful workplace training as well. It's really changing how we're going to do these projects in Cape Breton, and then hopefully build from those successes then the mainland, and see Nova Scotia as it in its entirety is truly a leader in this space.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, and I think it's really important for people to understand that it's diversity in the way that you hire, but also the diversity in the way you procure. And I know that and maybe you want to comment on this, Trent, but around that procurement is not just viewed anymore, at least from the lens that you're working from, as the lowest bid, right? So you're not just looking for the cheapest, right? There's more obligation from the contractors and the builders around that commitment to diversity. Is that right?
Absolutely. We've had lowest bid tendering processes now since the late 1800s, and that hasn't changed the face of construction. It hasn't changed our makeup. It hasn't created opportunities for underrepresented groups to get in our industry. We don't have a lot of women participating in construction. It just hasn't done that. And really, in changing the procurement model to be more social minded, we lift that platform. So competing on price for labor per se isn't what gets competed on now. It's around the quality, around the installation, the materials that are going to be used, processes, efficiencies, and to Beth's and Bob's earlier comments, how do we be more mindful in design? How do we be more mindful for longevity and environmental sustainability?
Yeah, it's so true. Such important considerations. So Roger, another hot topic. All of these are hot topics, but real estate has been such a hot topic, certainly since the pandemic. And, it almost feels like it exploded. Since March 2020, it's one sector that it seems like it's just, you can't keep up, right? Houses are not staying on the market, sometimes even for 24 hours. So I would love to know what your perspective is on what is driving this demand, and what does this mean for our economy right now, right? Because there's a lot of houses going for over asking. So what does that actually mean? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. So pre-pandemic, so pre-March of 2020, I guess we go back to now, the underpinnings were there for the real estate market to be successful. Maybe not to the point that it is right now, but the underpinnings were there. Our economic development agencies, such as the Cape Breton Partnership, the Halifax Partnership, NSBI, were doing a great job in selling this province. And then you have the institutions such as Cove, Volta, the one Beth is involved in, doing a great job in retaining our youth from the universities to provide them with an opportunity to not have to travel abroad. So once they graduate from university, there's actually opportunities here for them to get jobs, and not just entry-level jobs, but high-paying, good quality jobs as well. So the underpinnings were there, low interest rates. And quite frankly, I think we all know that Nova Scotia is an excellent place to live, and it's no longer a secret. It's out there now. Now, the great job that not to get too political here, but the great job our Premier did in shutting down the province, and Dr. Strang created an environment where we were one of the safest places in the world to live during this pandemic. So we also have a lot of folks that had moved away for various reasons, wanting to come back to Nova Scotia as well. And one of the selling points that the economic agencies were using was cost and the quality of life here. So we were, in my opinion, undervalued compared to the rest of the world, and we're starting to catch up now. So to answer your question about houses going over ask price and the average price of a home going up, I think we're catching up to where we should have been all along. I think we were undervalued for so many years, and now that the secret's out that Nova Scotia is a great place to live, there's tons of opportunity here. We're catching up. If you still take our average home, and we'll just use the three bedroom, 2 bath, maybe with some water frontage, and put that down in Ontario, in Alberta, in British Columbia, in the US, we're still, our average price is still under what they are in other parts of Canada. So I think we're catching up, and I think kudos to the economic development agencies for selling our province. Now we have to do our part, and I'm looking at Trent and right now in making sure that we actually have the inventory to supply the talent that they're attracting to the province. And to your point, what does this mean for the province? Well, we've done studies, our counterparts at the Canadian Real Estate Association, the economists did a study there. For every residential sale in Nova Scotia, there's ancillary spending created of $46,000. So I got our team to put together some numbers. So for Cape Breton to the end of March, there were 222 residential units sold. That equates to $10,212,000 being pumped back into the economy in the first quarter of this year. And ancillary spending is everything from going to Home Hardware to buy a can of paint, to hiring a landscaping company to hack down a tree or plant some seed or what have you. So movers, moving companies, all that stuff that goes along with whenever anyone buys a new home. Wow. So it's a positive thing to our economy. I don't view it as a bad thing. But having said that, we do have to be cognizant that we do have a bit of a housing issue right now, and we need to ensure that the housing stock increases. And affordable housing to us doesn't mean just low-income housing. It's across the spectrum.
Yes, and we'll dive into affordable housing here shortly. Just curious about that $10 million spending, which so 220 homes were purchased in Cape Breton Island since the beginning of 2021, or since the beginning of the pandemic?
No, since just this first quarter of this year. So wow. 222 units this year, 222 units, which is up 26% year over year.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So I'm actually going to build on everything that you folks just talked about, and it's around this whole notion of that scarcity versus abundance attitude. And I know that each of you are experiencing this in your own sectors as you experience this growth, as you advocate for this growth, as you see it for yourselves. And it's really around changing the narrative to, for Cape Breton Island, that we already have everything that we need, right? And we hear this a lot at the chamber, right? There's a lot of, there's this group of people that really believe that. And then there's another group of people that question that. And it's really around, seeing us as part of the bigger picture, right? Not just as Cape Breton, not just as Sydney to Cape Breton Island, but Cape Breton to Nova Scotia, Cape Breton to Atlantic Canada, and Cape Breton really to Canada and to the rest of the world, right? And I think when we look at that globalization mindset, we're especially looking to Beth and Bob and around what they're doing as we attract the world. But really, from Trent and Roger, both your perspective, I feel confident to say that that perspective really lends itself to attracting people to come work here as tradespeople and seeing the opportunity, and people that, like you said, Roger, that are also buying these homes and building commercial infrastructure and renting commercial infrastructure and so on and so forth. So it's also connected. And I think this panel is so diverse, but there's clear connection between all of you. So Trent, I'll start with you, because there has been this ongoing narrative, ongoing dialogue that we don't have what we need, that we have a labor shortage, that there's no way that we could possibly build $1 billion worth of infrastructure in the next 5 to 7 years with the people that we have here right now. So is that true? And whether it is or not, I would love to hear your stance on what we're doing about it.
So you're absolutely right. Labor shortage. I've got an article in my office here that I've had since the 90s that says labor shortage critical. And I keep that as a reminder that this has been the narrative for a very, very long time, especially for our sector. Is there a shortage of finding an electrician who's got 30 years experience, who's going to work for $13 an hour? Yeah, you're going to have trouble finding that individual. But in construction, just to give it again an idea, in ICI construction, we have about 3,500 trades professionals on Cape Breton Island. All right, these capital projects at a peak year are going to need to use about 700 of those 3,500 that are already in the system. So there's capacity there, and there has historically been a lot of unemployment or I would say seasonal employment or temporary employment in our sector, that these projects are going to provide a bit of a longevity over the next 5-7 years and give individuals who maybe have started their apprenticeship the opportunity to finish that. But it's also going to, the big sell for me on these projects, and the thing that I think gets us most excited in our industry, is to change the makeup of our industry, which is to be more welcoming and to really work with the underrepresented groups. And through the equity network there in Cape Breton, how do we find new entrants from those communities to be more reflective of where we live and where we work? And how do we provide that meaningful employment to see full length of careers established by the local labor force? And when I look at those numbers, and when we analyze what we have and what we can bring in as part of the requirements through these community benefit agreements, there's not a labor shortage. Our task now is really to align skills with where the opportunities are going to be. And if we have an overabundance of individuals, say, in a specific occupation, can we get skill training or transference training to move into a different occupation that will be in demand? And so, our office, and we've opened up an office in Sydney to help do this in Cape Breton, to make sure that we're able to align those who are pursuing occupations in our industry, both in the trades and in the management fields. They're being aligned with where the opportunities are. And a rule of thumb that we look at is, for every $1 billion of public investment, there's usually $1 billion worth of private investment that's going to follow that. And so really, the next 5 to 7 years are exciting. I think we have the talent, we have the individuals. We just need to do a good job of aligning those skill sets and providing training to do that. And all that's underway right now, where we're looking at new entrant training and training for the existing workforce specific to hospital development in the community college. And so that's where I'm getting really excited with the opportunities is around this development of our existing workforce and the local supply chain. Buying from our local hardware store, buying from our local community to really benefit the entire economy in Cape Breton.
Can I jump in there for 2 seconds?
Absolutely.
I think it's really important that organizations like Trent align with the developers, because what we hear from our local developers is they'd love to be building more houses, but they can't find workers. So we need to line them up with the folks that are available. And to his point, to Trent's point, you don't have to go your traditional routes. Like, you should be looking for the folks that can realign their skills so that we can match it up and move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's going to be a bit of an adjustment, not only in the housing market, the prices for homes. There's an adjustment that comes with paying people who are talented and skilled and professionals in their own right what they need in order to be successful in their careers. So there's an adjustment that's going to be happening there as well.
Exactly.
I wonder if I can jump in on the other end of the spectrum. It's amusing that, we've seen kids leave here for work across the rest of Canada, and now what we're seeing is them coming home. And they're coming home, obviously because they want to be here, but because there are jobs for them. So they've gone away and they've done, highly technical degrees, from the perspective of what we're building. And now we actually have jobs here at that level that they can come home to. So I think, to the point of the balance of labor, there's no reason we can't bring home all our talented kids, but also all of their colleagues with them. And so this is the intriguing thing. We're not having difficulty attracting that talent. And I don't want to put it down on it, but nobody ever asks me, where is Cape Breton and what does it look like? They're coming because the jobs are here, the capacity to grow their business is here. And I hope when they get here, they're going to go, man, that's awesome. I really actually picked a good place to go, right? I'm quite happy for us to keep it secret that Nova Scotia is a fantastic place to live. But the reality is they're coming because of what we've got. We've got construction. We've got a new bioeconomy, and it's across Nova Scotia. But it's also, to Bob's earlier point, because it's relevant nationally. There's a national need for what we do. And we're training people across Canada. And so, to draw people into those higher technical positions is not difficult if the jobs are there. And so I think that's partly why, Roger, to your point, we're seeing the demand for housing, because those people are coming for those jobs. So I think, going forward, what we can be asking ourselves is are we, to Trent's point, locally creating programs that are going to build more of those people and build them here. And so, connecting with the colleges and the universities and making sure that there are appropriate programs in place to generate the kinds of people that we need to hire is critical to continuing this growth.
And if I could add to that, we have second to none educational facilities throughout our province. And with the community college, with Cape Breton University, with Dalhousie and the extended learning opportunities that we have here, we have education programs to deliver what we need. And that's really where I think things start to get exciting, because the secret is out. The rest of the world is looking at Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia, and Cape Breton in particular right now about what the opportunities might be to come live, work, develop, raise families, all that sort of stuff here. Including investing in businesses. We're going to see a ton of new businesses looking to Cape Breton, and we're seeing that already with our contractor community, where contractors are looking at the potential and the opportunity, and they're relocating businesses to Cape Breton Island.
And I would just say, on the investment side, the multipliers are incredible. So, the first companies through our system, each company's coming already attracting, $1 to $2 million. Their next tranche of investment is double that. So, you don't take long before you've already got $20 million of investment right here in Nova Scotia. And as those companies build and build out, and Bob can attest to this, Innovacorp tracks that kind of investment multiplication. It's actually phenomenal, the potential of external investment dollars and local investment that's matching that to make sure those companies grow here in Nova Scotia.
How do you not get excited about that?
It's really exciting. The first 8 companies that we have moving here, they've got 7 employees on the ground well, this would be about a month old when we did our survey work, but they had 7 people on the ground at that time, and over the next 12 to 18 months, they're going to be hiring an additional 64 people. That is growth. These people are all going to need places to live there, and it's super exciting to see this type of interest and growth.
It's so true. And to further to Bob's point, and I know this from speaking with Bob, but these are high paying jobs. They're not minimum wage jobs. They're high paying jobs, which is really what each of you are all commented on. That level of the level of wages is only increasing, and especially here on Cape Breton Island, which will only contribute to our wealth and our ability to grow economically as well. So much. I agree with Roger. Like, how can you not be excited? Like, it goes back to why we call this conversation "Opportunity is Here," because opportunity is not coming. Although yes, it is. We're going to build on it, but it's here right now, right? This is really happening, and it's happening in real time. So I feel like we would be remiss not to have a balanced conversation without talking about the challenges of this growth, right? So what do we need to do for all those who are listening, those who are engaged in this conversation right now, and those who will watch it later? What does this mean in terms of how can we make sure that we, take reign of this opportunity? And, with all growth, there is growing pains, as we know, in every aspect. So I'm actually going to start with Roger about housing, because, and you alluded to this around this whole notion of affordable housing, and that the definition of affordable housing is not just low income housing. It's affordable housing for everyone, for me, for Bob, for Trent, right? Can we afford to live in the community in which we reside, right? And and that comes down to the valuation of our homes, but also access to, safe communities, safe neighborhoods, and all that. And then when we look to places like you mentioned, Vancouver and Toronto and these other places, the valuation of those homes, or the value of those homes, is a heck of a lot higher, way higher than even what homes are selling for right now. So how can we make sure, like, what is NSAR doing and involved in, and what is the policy that needs to happen around ensuring that we have affordable housing? So when Beth and Bob are bringing people in, and Trent is employing these people, that they do have a safe place to live in communities, not just here in Cape Breton, but all across our province.
Sure. So we're taking a very active part in the whole affordable housing, initiative right now. So we did put forward a submission that had 15 recommendations to the Nova Scotia Affordable Housing Commission. But to answer your question directly, I guess we need to be cognizant. When I say we, it's the royal we, everyone that's involved in ensuring housing in Nova Scotia needs to be cognizant that we can't focus on just one specific part of the spectrum, housing spectrum. So there has to be housing available for everyone. Not everyone is going to have the new high-paying jobs. So we need to ensure that we have housing that is on the lower end of the spectrum as well as the higher end of the spectrum, and ensure that whole communities, so they're not segmented. Like there has to be whole communities. So communities have the wide housing in across the whole spectrum. And I think there's a number of things that we can do short term, and there's a number of things that have a longer output. We all know that developing new housing takes time. Get through, whether it's getting permits, finding the talent to build, coming up with the supplies, but there's things that we can be doing now. So one of the recommendations that we've put forth in our submission is actually aimed at the province, and that is ensuring that municipalities have the right to take existing stock that they possibly have on the books that's not being used right now and turning that into affordable housing. Right now, it would require provincial permission to do so. We're asking that the province actually give the municipalities the power to say, hey, we have a warehouse is probably a poor example in this situation, but we have an office building that's sitting downtown that's 3 stories that's vacant right now. It's sitting on our books, used to be government offices. We don't need them anymore. And turning that, retrofitting that into affordable housing for folks, whether that be condos, whether that be whatever the case may be, whatever the current need is at that time. So that's just one example that wouldn't take a whole lot of effort, quite frankly. The second one is, and I think the government is aware of this and they're starting to take steps towards it, but is also ensuring that we have each community has adequate long-term care facilities. Because right now what we're seeing is folks are aging in place, if you will, in their homes, and they're requiring care to come into the home, and they can't sell their home, freeing up that stock because they have nowhere to go. So if we were to ensure long-term care facilities in each community, folks that are living in home that perhaps need additional care and no longer able to do that on their own would have a place to go, and that in turn would free up some housing stock for folks that are looking to buy a home. So those are just two examples of what we're doing, but I think what it really boils down to, going back to the Ivany report from a few years ago, and it's great to see so many stakeholders working together now, because it's going to require effort on everyone's part. There's no silver bullet in this case. It's going to require, in Nova Scotia's case, the provincial and municipal governments working together. It's going to require the home builders, the developers, the realtors. Everyone needs to work together to come up with the solutions. And they're not hard solutions. We just need to get out of our own way and seize the opportunity, if you will, and make it happen before it becomes a really bad crisis.
Thank you, Roger. And Roger's colleague Paige just uploaded in the chat the PDF of the document in which they submitted to the government around the affordable housing. So if anybody's interested, you can certainly download that and take a read through. For Beth and Bob, and when we think about what our challenges are, and certainly you can don't feel like you're binded to this one question, but I'm curious to know, what are the challenges? So you have a number of businesses, as Bob just mentioned, coming in. They're going to be hiring or bringing in 64 other people over the next 6 to 12 months. But what are the challenges before us right now? So we know we have the infrastructure with the Assurance Center. We can compete on a national, maybe even a global level in terms of what we can offer to these companies. But what are our challenges for growth in this sector? What's holding us back? What do we need to overcome over the next 4, 6, 12 months and so on to really realize this potential of growing this sector here in Cape Breton Island?
Do you want to start, Beth?
I might never stop. I'm gonna put that out there. Yeah, everything. As Roger says, it's very exciting. But another key point that you raise is growth has to be inclusive. And that's not just about diversity. That's a nice trendy term, but it needs to be a truly, joint collaborative, because by building together, not just like we've done bringing clean tech companies, but building more innovative housing, you can also address the affordability of housing on the operating side. So I look at everything as a business. If my operating costs are high, I still can't afford my home. And I think right now, the positioning of our federal government, the alignment of our provincial government, it's got a lot of money on the table to try to rethink what we want to design by way of housing infrastructure. There's great opportunities in net zero, which basically can be done at an affordable price and gives a family or individuals a net zero energy bill, which, not to harp on it, but, Cape Breton has traditionally had issues with energy poverty. That can be removed by working on more collaborative housing type situations where you integrate the need for renewables and greening in what we build. And I don't want to tell Trent his job, because he could probably march all over me on green housing builds. But I think the point being, microgrids, connected renewables, distributed heat systems, all of those things will assist us to make housing more affordable. And so I think, we always have to stop kind of really looking at what we've got today and look at what we need to be tomorrow.
100%.
And that is, we can have apartments above stores in our downtowns. those need to be affordable. What does that need? That needs, everybody at that regulatory level to start thinking outside the box. How do we make it possible to rezone things, to provide tax incentives to create those things, and also to marry that with our renewable energy goals? And to me, they're so aligned. We would be remiss not to start thinking about planning different types of housing. And from an investment standpoint, being a business person myself, we need to have an attractive business environment. It needs to be affordable to build our businesses here. And generally that means, reduce the regulatory burden. It's probably been talked about for centuries, as long as I'm old. But yeah, reduce the regulatory burden. We're not our own best friend when it comes to making it a good environment to build a business right now. So I think we need to change some of those things. Bob?
Well, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the things that I'm facing on a daily basis as these companies are growing and moving here. We initially thought that talent attraction would be a challenge, and it's not. That is quite evident that the talent is available and very willing to move to Cape Breton. We very quickly changed gears to housing has been a bit of an issue. Traveling during a pandemic, trying to move to Nova Scotia during a pandemic has been a bit of a challenge. Let's hope that's short term, because I think we will be out of that. We'll be out of that fairly soon. But other things like having a welcoming community, transportation, public transportation within the community are also important factors that, again, just make us more welcoming, make us a great place to live and want to do business. And something that we've been really big on as well is investing in these companies as well. All of these companies are growing, they're all raising capital. Part of what we're trying to do is also encourage investors in Atlantic Canada who like to invest in this space to participate in those rounds, because it does a few things. It anchors the companies here. It helps to keep some of that wealth as these companies grow and become successful. They're going to generate wealth, and that will stay in our region, which then reinforces that decision to continue growing and building these high growth sectors.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. It goes to show that, with growth, there certainly are challenges, but and Beth, the the government red tape is something that was recently addressed in the budgeting process with our provincial government, but there is still a lot of work to do for sure. Trent, so you mentioned, obviously, you said that we have about 3,500 tradespeople here. We need year over year about 500, I think was the number that you mentioned. But we also talked quite a bit about training, and that lends itself to all of the sectors that are on this panel today. So when this construction with the healthcare and NSCC concludes, let's say in 7 years from now, we're going to have a highly trained, skilled workforce. And what's next? Where do they go? I know that you mentioned that with $1 billion in public sector investment, often comes, roughly $1 billion in private sector. Do you think that really can happen here in Cape Breton? And do you think that level of investment will maintain these newly highly skilled workers in the construction and trade sector to sustain, ample employment here in Cape Breton for the long term?
I think so. The initial investment is certainly going to spark innovation. And to what Beth and Bob were talking about, when you get that innovation and then you get other groups that then come to Cape Breton, they innovate as well and they grow. You start to see that momentum grow, and that's really what I think we're starting to see now, and I think we're going to see this over the next decade, if not 2 decades, is the momentum start to pick up where we become more innovative, we build differently. And to the earlier comment around net zero, absolutely, design is going to change, and how we build things is going to change, and the training that will come with that. Contractors are innovative, and when a client says, so when we talk about our sector, we talk about a client and our contractor. Client says, I want to build a house differently, I want to build a building differently, I want to build it with different labor, I want to do these things. Contractors innovate pretty quickly overnight and find ways to make it happen. That's sort of the nature of our business. So it comes down to then design being done well, finding those individuals to become trained, and our forecast for demographics. The interesting thing about that, we're kind of in this real sort of hot time right now, where if we do these projects well, when we do these well and we integrate more underrepresented groups into our sector, and when we grow the skill set within our sector, the demographic numbers, say in the next 7 to 10 years, we're going to have a mass retirement. So we're actually building the workforce now so that when we get to that period of time, 7 to 10 years from now, we have an entirely new workforce in many ways. And we're trying to make sure that when we get there, we have the workers to then keep our industries moving forward. And to go back to one of the earlier comments around, challenges, for us in ICI construction, what we're doing right now is new. It hasn't been done in our sector before. Being more diverse, social, sourcing locally, these are all new concepts that we're putting in place. And we have to get away from, well, we've always done it this way. We have to get away from that. And I think that applies to all of our sectors. We're looking at how do we become more innovative in how we go. So we have to leave the history behind us, learn from it, and do things differently. We have to celebrate that, promote that. And for us, we have to change the perspective of construction. A lot of people look at, my industry and say, I don't want to get into construction. It's long hours, it's dirty work, it's low skill. We hear that stuff all the time. And it's not the case. When somebody's on a hospital project, it's highly regulated. Personal protective equipment and safety training and trades training, access to sites, infectious disease training, all those things are extremely sophisticated. And when you walk into a building, you look at the floor and you can look at the ceiling and you look around what's in the building. It's always amazing to see all the technology and the skills that go into those new buildings. As that changes, I think we're going to see. But if we can change the perspective of where the opportunities are, and the level of technology and the level of skill set that's required to perform our industry, I think we're gonna see a real big change in 7, 10, 20 years from now. We'll start to take care of itself then, because we'll be building off that momentum as we go forward. And Cape Breton is, in my mind, uniquely positioned to provide a lot of these opportunities. And I love the comments around affordable housing and repurposing land or repurposing buildings. In a former life, I was in city planning, and these are things that we talked about then without putting mechanisms in place. So the how is going to be critical. And I think there's a real appetite now, certainly among the Chamber's members, certainly among the councillors in Cape Breton Regional Municipality. There's a real appetite to do things differently. And I think that's what's going to lead us into the future.
Yeah, I love that. And that it's so true. And it goes back to what Beth said earlier. It's, building, not just thinking about today, but building for tomorrow, and building obviously in your sector, but across our people, across the opportunities that we see, and, really seeing it. I often use the phrase like, let's get off the ground a little bit. Let's see things from a 20,000 foot view, 50,000 foot view, 100,000 foot view. And the moment we have the ability and mind frame to do that, then we start seeing things differently. But to your point, I think that's also true. It's only having all those people trained through the opportunities that exist now, hopefully will only breed more entrepreneurial spirit, new businesses. And to your point, and to Beth's point, to all of your point, is that the level of innovation that exists now in the workforce that is kind of coming to is so much different than the workforce that existed 20 years ago, as we see them leave and retire and whatnot. So it is really exciting. So we're just about at time. I don't know if anybody's watching has questions, but we would love to hear them. If you do, we have a few more minutes. And if not, that's okay. I have one final question if we need it, but I do feel like putting it out to the floor. If anybody has any questions for any one panelist specifically, or maybe a question Okay, Craig has one. You do have to type it in, Craig. This is not the same as Zoom, so I can't unmute you, unfortunately. But if you have a moment to type it in, we'd love to take it. And if anybody else has a question too, feel free to type it in here, and we'll try to do some rapid fire as quickly as possible over the next few moments. While Craig's typing, I guess I would love to know, and I'll get you to ruminate on this because we'll end with this question. But from your perspective, even in your own space, but also from this conversation today and just your overall manifesto of, what we see Cape Breton could be and what we think it can be, and Nova Scotia, what is the biggest opportunity that you see right now? Like, what is, we say opportunity is here. And I think this past, 40 minutes or so has demonstrated that, and even just, scratched the surface in a lot of ways. But it is here right now. And all of you are at the forefront of that. And you're seeing that every day. I often say with my role at the Chamber, I have a front row seat to a lot of, what the rest of the community doesn't always have the opportunity to see. So just think about that. And I'm going to go around the table just as we close out. But Craig Boudreau's question, correlation between public and private investment. Would you mind reinstating? Oh, yes. So we often do talk about this and, how public and private is so correlated. So, and even Beth and Bob, you can talk about this, and Roger, I'm sure you can speak to this as well. When the public sector comes to the table, and I think, Trent, I'm going to quote you here from a one-on-one conversation that we've had, but it builds confidence. You use that word. Public sector investment builds confidence. And I know, Beth, you talked about that. When public sector comes to the table and it allows us to stack those dollars with private sector investment, it just explodes opportunity. Can you folks speak to that a little bit more and expand on what that actually means when public sector is supportive of innovation and of private sector developments?
From a planning principle, for many decades, municipalities always reside their governments in downtowns. And there's a reason for that. When you have your municipality, your government reside in downtown, it creates businesses around the government offices, and then that just kind of continuously grow out. When governments leave downtowns tend to die, and that's kind of the concept. So as public infrastructure happens, whether it be hospitals or what have you, and that investment comes in, next thing you know, we need a commercial center to be able to provide break times or lunches for those workers who are working in that, that new facility. We see a new and innovative supply chain start to develop there. They then need grocery stores next to the communities they're starting to build new homes in, and it just starts to germinate from that public investment. And we're seeing that already. When I drive downtown through Sydney, and I've only been able to do this a couple of times since the pandemic started, the college got announced. And I drive down just the Esplanade, for example, and the number of new apartment buildings that are being built in the foresight of where students may want to live to then go to school. They're then going to need convenience stores. They're then going to need, restaurants nearby, and it keeps growing from that. And that's really where the $1 billion of public turns into $1 billion of private, is to create all the supports to keep those major infrastructure projects and all their people that work there, integrated into the community and able to access services.
Yeah, and just to build on that, the companies that we've attracted this past year to Cape Breton to work at the Research Center in the bioeconomy, they've raised about $8 million, and we've run it through some economic models, and that's going to generate output of just around 16 million, which is pretty incredible. It's doubling what they're raising, and in 1 year that's exciting. But when you start to project what does that look like over a few years, we're talking about in 5 years it's looking like almost $400 million if we can continue the pace that we're on, what we've seen in the past year. That gets super exciting.
That's incredible.
I'll jump in on that one lastly too, and take my industrial bio hat and put my renewable energy hat on. Some of our biggest projects right now in community and institutional realms are a collaboration of multiple levels of government, from municipal up to federal. And Trent alluded to this. I think the government stars are aligned to leverage public dollars through multiple tiers to get projects done. So we can do community-based projects in renewable energy, in housing development, by stacking that public dollar. And its multiplier is huge. And it's what will get us over the line to where we need to be, not only in terms of development, and that's why I say it has to be inclusive development. It needs all levels of government to communicate with each other. On a renewable perspective, at every level of government has already announced their GHG emission goals in terms of reduction. Everybody's targeting the same thing for 2030 and 2050, pretty much across the board. So if we're all heading in the same direction, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's collaborate and get it done together. And I think that's where we'll see success.
Yeah, and to build on what Beth said, and to answer your question, Kathleen, around where do we see opportunity? Ultimately, it's about what is our competitive advantage. So what can we do better than anybody else in any other location? And that's what we have to focus on. It's great to rely on ingenuity and beautiful location, which that is specific here. But what are the other strengths that we can bring that truly make us rise above other locations? And certainly what we're doing with Beth in industrial biotech and agritech is second to none in the world, and it provides a huge competitive advantage. And I see nothing but growth in that sector here, and not something that can be easily done in large cities either, which is again really lays its advantage, again, to a region like ours where you're not competing against large cities.
I guess I'll jump in and answer your question on opportunity. I think right now the opportunity is there for us to seize, and a key component to that is to change the mindset. And I think it's happening slowly, but to really grasp onto the mindset of we are a have province, not a have not, and just rely on each other to move ahead. I get excited when I see the organizations tapping into the university talent, such as Beth, such as Cove, such as Volta. So we have the infrastructure in place with the university. I think we have like 7 or 8 or 10 high quality universities and colleges in Nova Scotia, tapping into that talent, providing them with job opportunities once they've got their schooling, and then they can stay in Nova Scotia. And to the multiplier effect, once you start investing in that, you're going to see, to Beth's point, you're going to see tiers of investing. So investors just don't invest on a whim. They have to see something. So the fact that they're actually, you might get your seed funding, but the fact that they're going in 2, 3, 4 seeds, the opportunity is there to create wealth in Atlantic Canada. We have all the underpinnings, if you will. We just got to seize it and stop saying the woe is me crap, and just say, hey, we can do this. And because that's been the message for so long in Atlantic Canada. What's the federal government doing for us? Woe is me. Here's my handout. We don't need that anymore. We can do this. We just have to recognize that the opportunity's here and seize it.
Well
Success breeds success.
Yeah. As they say, louder for the people in the back. Thank you, Roger. So it's so true. It's so true. And I again, I'm quoting all of you, but you've all said it so well over the times that we've all had the opportunity to talk, even today and in preparation for this. But Beth, and you can elaborate on this just quickly if you want, and really to Roger's point is that we have to think ourselves as we're a part of the ecosystem of economic development for this entire country. And we are playing a really big role in that right now. And, the biotech sector and what Beth and Bob are doing, for everyone listening, has gotten national attention. I mean, it was published in the Globe and Mail. It has, that they're getting a lot of incredible attention from companies all over the globe, not just their own country. But the view is that, and Beth, you said this, but we will not be successful unless we do something that is globally significant. And I think even what Trent is working on in terms of diversifying the workforce and changing the game in construction, changing the view of construction and who it's attracting and how we can get more people involved. And like Beth's mentioned, having inclusive growth, right? Growing all parts of our economy inclusively and considering everyone and everything. And how can we create this ecosystem within our own communities, within our own economic economic centers, within our own economy from a regional and provincial standpoint, that is feeding off everyone. And I think, when we announced this panel from afar, or not really understanding who each of you are, it might have seemed a little bit disjointed, but it just goes to show that silos don't help anyone, right? That all of us talking and not just on a panel discussion, but as we do our day-to-day and engaging, and I know Trent has done that, and Rochelle is on watching today, and she's the employee here in, here for Trent's organization here in Cape Breton, but integrating more, talking to one another more, seeing how we interact, utilizing each other as we're all assets to one another. And the more that we work together and understand which one another needs, it's only going to breed creativity, innovation, economic development, and so on. So, I really hope that this isn't our last conversation. I know it won't be, but maybe we can all revisit this in 6 to 8 months, 9, 10 months from now, hopefully on the other side of this pandemic as we all become vaccinated. Because, as challenging as this time has been for the whole world and still is, I mean, Cape Breton has been incredibly well positioned, and that's in thanks to our provincial government and the handling of the pandemic, but it's also based on who we are and the type of community that we are and our geographical location and so many other things. So I think that all four of you have only demonstrated that we've been able to capitalize on this really trying time, and I think over the next even 5 to 7 years, we have a lot of work to do in order to only capitalize on that further as we know what's possible here, because opportunity is here, and I think you've all demonstrated that. Do any of you have anything else to add before we say goodbye?
Share the excitement and stay well.
Stay well, stay healthy.
Thank you. Yes, and I agree. Let's share the excitement. I think that there's tangible energy happening here in Cape Breton, in Nova Scotia. I'm sure glad that I would never live anywhere else. And I feel so confident in saying that I think we do live in the best province and on the best island in the world. And I'm incredibly grateful. So thank you, Beth. Thank you, Bob, Roger, and Trent. I was so hopeful that we were going to all be able to come together in person, but thank you all for saying yes to this virtual opportunity. And I really, really look forward to continuing the conversation. And I know that there's so many others that tuned in today that are looking forward to it as well. So thank you all so much. Stay well, as Trent said, and we'll all hopefully see each other soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kathleen.
Thank you very much.